My name is Sandy Adomaitis, the social media director for the Page International Screenwriting Awards, and your host for the Writers Hangout, a podcast that celebrates the many stages of writing, from inspiration to the first draft, revising, getting a project made, and everything in between. We'll talk to the best and the brightest in the entertainment industry and create a space where you can hang out, learn from the pros, and have fun. The views expressed on this podcast are Peter Dekom's opinions based on his legal experience, research, and academic work. Hey, writers, it's Sandy. I'm coming to you from Studio City, the crown jewel of the San Fernando Valley, and home to Balboa Boulevard, the street where Sylvester Stallone had a dingy apartment and was writing the screenplay for Rocky, hence Rocky Balboa. Great name. Things would have been different if Sly had an apartment on Pico. Writers, boy, do we have a great show for you today. My guest is Peter Dekom, formerly of Bloom, Decker, and Hergot, has represented remarkable clients, including George Lucas, Keenan and Ivy Wayans, John Travolta, Ron Howard, and Robert Towne. Peter now has his own podcast, Dekom, Law and Possibilities, which cuts through the noise with sharp analysis, wry humor, and decades of legal expertise. Peter's returning for the second time on the Writers Hangout. Peter's here to talk about what everyone in Hollywood is talking about: the bidding war for Warner Brothers' Discovery between Netflix and Paramount. Let's start the show. Peter Dekom, welcome back to the Writers Hangout.
Size matters, so I sighed.
The last time you were on, which was March 9th, 2025, and for all our listeners and writers out there, it is the most talked about episode that I've ever done. Peter?
Yeah.
Before we start, how has 2026 been for you so far?
2025 is a horrible year that will only get worse in 2026. And that means writers need to prepare to be the rebels they were born to be.
Now, you're here to talk about the Netflix, which announced in December of 2025 that it would acquire Warner Brothers Discovery's film and streaming assets, including HBO and HBO Max, for a little over $82 billion. Then Paramount Sky...
How about 108? It's now up to $108 billion.
Oh, wow. Now, Paramount Skydance came in and launched a hostile bid urging the Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders to reject the Netflix deal and says they'll buy everything. Peter, what does this mean for the creatives in Hollywood?
We're all going to make less money. There are going to be fewer pieces of content, and there'll be more homogeneous creative decisions made by executives, not to mention the fact that writers, I know the title that uses the word, the new subversive writers, but it's true. Writers are historically subversive. Let me just do a little historical journey back to China, circa 600 BC, the time of Confucius. Basically, what happened is he lived as a consultant from one Chu-duke to another Chu-duke to another Chu-duke. They ran China at that time, 600 BC. And the general situation was if you said something or you looked them in the eye, did something they didn't like, they would cut off your head. So people learn how to talk in mysterious ways. If you want to say, I disagree with you, that's instant death. So the way you would disagree with someone is you say, instead of saying, well, there's another way of looking at this, you would instead say there are 1,000 flowers in the field. So if someone challenged you, you simply say, I was talking about flowers. And so you get this indirect, plausible deniability that was built into anyone writing, speaking, or otherwise dealing at that time. We are in that era in the United States today. And as much as this merger has got everybody's attention, it's a tadpole in a swimming pool of sharks. It's not what's really happening. You have to look at a much bigger picture. And I hope to do that. Last year, I got so pissed, and I do get pissed every now and again, that I actually started my own. I've been doing blogs for, I don't know, since 2008. I've got about 6,000 or 7,000 of those on shred.blogspot.com. But I didn't think it was a powerful enough method of communicating the panic and disgust that I have with the world around me these days. So I created a new one. And it's available on podcasts at Apple, Spotify, whatever, wherever you get your podcasts.
Peter, congratulations on the podcast. I've listened and it's riveting.
Well, frogs also make little riveting sounds. But anyway, all I will tell you is it's called Dekom, exclamation point, Law and Possibilities. Let's talk. This is actually, when you're looking at this takeover of Warner Brothers Discovery, it's a symptom of what's going on a macro basis all over the world, but particularly in the United States. The issue with this is both political and economic. Now, clearly, Larry Ellison is one of the top 5 wealthiest human beings in the United States. He's the principal shareholder in Oracle. His son, David Ellison, has been in the motion picture business, financing some pretty hot movies, including a whole bunch of Paramount blockbusters like the Maverick movie, et cetera. He knows what he's doing. But what you're watching as people are looking at Warner Brothers, which is absolutely, if you look at last night's awards, Warner Brothers Discovery, in terms of the motion picture world and the television world, is probably the most successful major studio out there in terms of creative reach and audience satisfaction. So clearly, this is a very valuable asset. The Warner Brothers library also includes a whole bunch of comics. There's a bunch of stuff there, and it's amazing. But, and here's the big but. I used to have one, but I'm losing it. The reality here is there is consolidation. And whenever you have major consolidation, that takes a buyer off the marketplace. And when you take a buyer off the marketplace, literally, it reduces prices. There's less competition, fewer places to go. And when you start seeing one company cut back in order to accommodate acquisition costs, which are massive, you'll see other major creative companies using that as an excuse. Well, I'm not going to pay it. They're not paying it. And the whole price structure collapses. One thing you can't look forward to anytime soon is sharing an upside. That appears to be dead, even though there are various and sundry kinds of lovely alternatives, little back-end descriptions. The fact of the matter is the linkage one-to-one on what a company is making and what you will make if you're on a successful production, movie, or television is completely unrelated. Also understand that for people who are getting these bonus structures, there are definitional provisions that pretty much eliminate the long tail with a few exceptions. Apple has a long tail where you have an iconic property that continues to perform. There is a provision for, these iconic legacy properties. But for the most part, upside has gone. And when they give you the box office bonuses and stuff based on theatrical release, understand the average theatrical release today is not 6 months or 9 months as it may have been in the past. It's 45 days. So whatever else is said and done, the old multiples, the formulas, the box office sharing, and all that bullcrap is gone. So what you're going to see is what you get, unless you're lucky enough to be in that rarefied air of $1 gross, and which isn't really $1 gross, but that's beyond the pale of this discussion to go into it. Let's talk a little bit about what happened. You have a company. It's called Netflix. It is huge. And I have to say, the guy who runs it, Ted Sarandos, he's one of 2 CEOs. But Ted, as much as you would love me to trash Ted, I can't. Ted is actually a good guy. I like him. I know him pretty well. We serve on a board together. I watched him deal with creative people. He actually likes and respects creative people. He actually is a very creative, sensitive human being, even though Mela Bahar is now the head of creative at Netflix. I will just tell you that Ted's not a bad guy. Okay. The bad news is when you get a company of this size, which is bigger than all the other streamers combined, except YouTube, which is in a different world because it tends to be short form content and other people's channels. What you're basically getting is a single unitary perspective of what to be picked up. And whether you like it or not, Netflix is governed by algorithms. Analytical algorithms look at themes, track records, the Q scores, as we used to call them, of various participants in a production or movie, actors, directors, writers, what the genre is, and what the marketplace looks like. And that algorithm will analyze a screenplay that's submitted and the creative elements that are attached, and it will spit out a recommendation to the creative participants, creative deciders in the company. And that algorithm will become one of the major parts of the decision to greenlight something or to develop it. Development deals are going to be increasingly rare because everybody understands with fewer buyers, they need to be seduced more, and you need to have more elements to put the stuff together. So I think I said this last time, but I'll say it again. To get a production in today's world, unless you are already an established superstar, it takes a village. It takes a whole lot of people who love the property and are willing to go to bat for it, people who have credibility within the industry. If you try to go and say, my agent submits this and it goes in, you're dead in the water, unless you're Steven Spielberg or you're some other superstar in that world. You really have to understand this is a seduction. And you may want to create, visual materials, maybe even play with AI. Did I say AI? Well, guess what, folks? No matter what the Writers Guild or any of the other unions are doing, going to stop it. So we're going to have to learn to deal with it one way or another. And I know that the collective bargaining agreements begin negotiations in February. This time, it is not the Directors Guild that starts off. It's the Writers Guild. And that's on purpose because the Directors Guild was the last to go in the last round. And they believe they were screwed because every other union used what the Directors Guild did and upped it. So the DGA said, we're not going to do that no more. They speak with a weird accent. I don't know why they do that, but they do. In any event, I don't think there's going to be a strike. I don't think the increase in compensation is going to be more than 3%. I think there's going to be a focus on pension and health benefits. I think that's health care in particular, because as you know, Congress appears at this point looking either to repeal it or substitute it with something that is absolutely inferior, just as costs are skyrocketing. But let's get back to this acquisition. Number one, it's an antitrust problem. And the issue here, if you're in Europe and this company mergers of this size and nature will have to go through scrutiny before the European Union. There is an antitrust commission that looks at these things. And it's not going to be particularly favorable to this type of merger or acquisition, whatever you want to call it. There's always bits of merging, acquiring, and all these things. You have a battle here between two behemoths. Netflix made an offer to acquire not all the assets, but the HBO and theatrical and the production arm of Warner Brothers, leaving the linear television and CNN. We'll talk about CNN in a moment because that is actually one of the battlegrounds. And leaving those companies to be either spun off separately or bought by another company. It's going to be a standalone or otherwise. Paramount's Skydance proposal is to buy everything. That includes CNN and all those linear networks, Turner Broadcasting, all that stuff, Discovery Networks, all that crap. Obviously, Netflix doesn't want that. But here's the problem Netflix faces. If this company, Warner Brothers Discovery, is acquired by somebody else and they happen to have a streaming capacity, but what you're doing here is taking product out of the output that Netflix currently enjoys. Some of Netflix's most successful content comes from Warner Brothers. Things like Suits and Young Sheldon are among the most popular shows. They outperform the movies, they outperform everything else on Netflix. And if other companies happen to have streaming operations, Disney, Comcast, Peacock, and you start looking at these and you think, well, if they are streamers and they wind up buying Warner Brothers, then Netflix isn't going to be able to buy that content anymore. So Netflix felt threatened immediately and they said, you know what? I don't want a streaming company like Peacock or someone like Pluto that are owned by other companies. I don't want them in the mix. I'm going to preempt it. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to pay a lot of money for it. Now, let's look at the politics of this thing. Larry Ellison is very conservative and very much affiliated with the Trump people.
Father to David Ellison.
And he is a father to David Ellison, who would be running Skydance Paramount, which would acquire this thing. And so as a result, there was apparently a meeting
The new year brings new writing goals, and like many of you out there, I am committed to finishing my novel that I've been working on for years. We all know that the details you jot down when you start can quickly become fuzzy when days, weeks, and even months pass between writing sessions. I wish I had Novellium, our sponsor, which is a fantastic writing tool that quickly turns chaos into clear, well-organized stories when I started writing. Whether you write directly on Novellium or upload an existing draft, your characters and setting details, timeline events, and plot pacing are automatically pulled from your story to view at a glance. And in real time, Novellium catches the problems you might miss on your own. Plot tangles, pacing issues, continuity errors, even character logic slips. Novellium isn't another AI content generator. It never writes for you or learns from your work. This is a privacy-first tool that leaves your voice untouched and never shares your data. Instead, Novellium keeps you in control through every stage of your writing process. It's your text editor, character files, continuity checker, and more in one organized, lightning-fast platform. You can even use Novellium to share your work securely with beta readers and keep track of their comments. Don't wait until your draft is finished. Get the most out of your writing this year with Novellium. Try Novellium Pro today and get your first month free at novellium.so with code HANGOUT. That's NOVELIUM.SO with code HANGOUT. NOVELIUM.SO with code HANGOUT.
The rumors have it that there was a meeting between Larry, maybe David, someone named Donald John something. And apparently Donald John something said, I want CNN sold, but I don't want it sold to an unfriendly party. And I am told, I can't tell you that I know this from direct knowledge, but I believe it's true, that they made an agreement that CNN would operate as a much more conservative network, and that a number of people within CNN who are bent as liberal would be disposed of. How do we know what this means? Well, let's look what happens when Skydance, Paramount, basically owns CBS. You may have noticed that they are laying off all kinds of people. And the excuse, you just fired some very, very senior producers. And here's what it says when they fire someone. We find that these producers, these on-air personalities, are no longer aligned with our vision, which means they're not presenting a conservative perspective. You will notice that certain new telecaster on CBS Evening News, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it, it's Dekom, or whatever it is, Dekom. Tony is not a particularly well-known guy, but he is liked very much by the Trump administration. You'll also notice that 60 Minutes had a little editorial moment when they decided not to air the piece on CCOT, that prison in El Salvador, where they got exclusive footage because in Barry Weiss, the new head of news for the entire Skydance Paramount group, decided that it didn't present the administration side. And it didn't have any actual interviews of people from the Trump administration. Even though they asked the Trump administration if they had anything to add, and the Trump administration said, no, we don't. When it started to come up, guess what happened? That show got shut down. And a lot of people were unhappy. So you now have Dekom taking over the desk at CBS Evening News. And he's a nice guy, but in my mind's eye, he's vanilla without the bean, but more likely a little bit more like a right-wing vanilla without the bean. So now we have this Paramount behemoths with one of the richest people in the world, Larry Ellison, apparently ready to put his giant checkbook into the mix. And Netflix has an agreement with Warner Brothers that says you can't entertain any other offers. If someone comes out and offers you something, your shareholders can look at it. We can't stop that by law, but we're not going to let you have conversations with them to negotiate what you want. Oh, well, that's really nice. What they're doing is the board of directors at Warner Brothers Discovery looked at the Paramount offer and said, look, we have to figure out the difference when you carve out the CNN piece, how much all that's worth. One group says it's worth $15 billion. And there are other costs. So the $30 a share that was offered is now reduced by some arbitrary amount by the board. And basically they turned around and said, we do not back. We tell the shareholders, we recommend, and we're not dealing with Paramount directly. We're telling our shareholders that the hostile tender offer, which has to be responded to by January 21st, is not good and is not comparable. There's also a lot of borrowing going on, so that if in fact Paramount Skydance takes Warner Brothers Discovery, there's always a chance that the resulting company may wind up being insolvent because it's really taking up like $87 billion worth of debt. And it gets worse than that because they're even saying, we're not even sure, Larry Ellison, since you're doing a lot of twisting and storming using bank financing, that these banks won't find an excuse to pull out their financing. So unless you're ready to step out and write the check directly, if for some reason these banks don't decide to cling on, Star Trek illusion, cling on to you, you're going to have to write a check. And Larry Ellison said, I might do that. So we have a big fight for this asset. But if you were watching the Golden Globes, or one of the few people doing that, Nikki Glaser had some cool lines. She said, and the award for editing goes to 60 Minutes. And there's a new news service out there created by this company. It's called CBS. So you are watching an industry that is not happy with what's going on. And Trump is in the middle of this. If your name is Jimmy Kimmel, or perhaps you are the CBS situation, whatever it is, you see a guy named Brendan Carr who is basically saying, you know what? I'm head of the FCC, and I'm going to go after all those broadcast licenses that are at the bulwark of what you do. Well, you know what? You can't do that. But it doesn't stop them from threatening. It doesn't stop them from saying we're going to do it whether we can do it or not. And that's not what we want to hear. So what we have is this little teeny thing called CNN that Donald Trump wants to make sure is going to be sold to the right player. There's so many approvals that the government has to give. SEC for transfers of stock and mergers and acquisitions, Federal Communications Commission for transfers of broadcast licenses, the Department of Justice Federal Trade Commission in connection with antitrust issues. So the government's all over this, and they don't want Netflix to get it. And everyone is scared of Netflix anyway, because it's so damn big that if it acquires this huge asset, HBO and CBS and Warner Brothers and Discovery and all that stuff, that it is going to be completely creatively monolithic. And so we don't like that. On the other hand, looking at Paramount Skydance buying the same asset, it's going to be profoundly political. So we're not going to make remotely the kind of money we were used to making. It was bad enough when they pulled back because of the FinCEN rule. But this little thing came out. You have people spending lots and lots of money acquiring sports. And when that money goes into sports, like NBA made an 11-year, $77 billion rights deal with Disney, ESPN, Comcast, NBC, and Peacock, and Amazon Prime. All these people are buying sports. That is the same budget that they use to buy or create original movies, original series. 2 years ago, 50% of what Netflix aired on their original programming, they financed. But then today, it's 30% and sliding. So you're looking at the fact that Comcast and Disney have announced that they're going to pull way back on entertainment spending. So what do? You're a writer here. Number one, when I called you subversive, I think you really need to take that to heart. Because the only way you're going to get stuff done in this world is to be subversive. You need to find new ways to express yourself, and it may not be looking for a gig or selling a script. It may be doing something on YouTube, building a creative following. Be inventive, be subversive, be creative. There is always a path. And I will tell you throughout history, whether you're Solzhenitsyn or you're someone writing during the Chew period, writers have always been sacrificed. Writers have always been the first thing that people kill. Every dictator, whether it's Hitler or you've got the lovely people, Orban or Erdogan, or you go down the list, when they take power, one of the first things they curtail is media. And you are writers and you write for media. So you're in the crosshairs of a major conservative political swing. Even if you're conservative and you write conservative stuff, you elicit backlash and you disrupt the calm seas of dictatorial takeover. You have to find a way. You need to do this. You also should hang in and listen to my podcast, again, Dekom, Law and Possibilities.
Thank you so much for being on the Writers Hangout.
I will talk to you anon. Hopefully you'll join me on my podcast. We're starting off audio only, but every single one of my episodes is on video. Law and Possibilities.
Writers, I'm really glad we get to do this, and every week you show up, because if you didn't, I'd just be talking to my cat, Sophie Joe.
And that's a wrap for the Writers Hangout. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Your positive feedback will help us keep the show going so we can continue bringing you more future episodes. Remember, keep writing. The world needs your stories. The Writers Hangout is sponsored by the Page International Screenwriting Awards with executive producer Kristin Overn, Sandy Adomaitis, and myself, Terry Sampson. And our music is composed by Ethan Stoller.
Alexa, you are gaslighting me.